It shattered before she could blink. A single jarring crunch, like a scream from the past, echoed against the marble walls of the Midtown Promenade. The violin splintered in two, its neck twisted and hollow body cracked open like a wounded chest. Emily stood frozen, one hand still holding the bow, the other hovering in disbelief. The man who had collided with her didn't stop, didn't apologize, just stared at the broken instrument as if he'd knocked over a cup of coffee instead, avenging someone's reason to breathe. "What the hell do you think you just did?" she snapped, her voice trembling with rage, not fear. The man turned slowly, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, calm in a way that only made her angrier. He wore a tailored coat, too expensive for this neighborhood, shoes that had never known dirt, and a smirk that looked permanently stitched onto his face. "I didn't see it," he said flatly. "You shouldn't be standing in the middle of a walkway like that." It wasn't the walkway. It was my stage. She knelt, cradling the shattered wood like a dying pet. That was my livelihood. Her voice cracked, embarrassment burning her cheeks. People were watching now, some out of pity, most out of curiosity. The man seemed to register that. "I'll replace it," he said with a shrug, already pulling out his phone. "How much was it worth?" She looked up at him, stunned. You can't just replace a 20-year-old violin. It wasn't a price tag. It was mine. He paused. Something flickered in his expression, something not quite guilt, more like calculation. "Look," he sighed, lowering his voice. "I really didn't mean to. Let me make it right. I know a luthier, No," she cut him off. "Just go. Go back to wherever people like you come from and pretend this didn't happen." She stood slowly, gathering the remains in her case. Her hands were shaking. He didn't leave. "My name's Nathaniel Blake," he offered almost awkwardly. "I don't care," she said before he could finish. "Unless you run a time machine. Nothing you say is going to undo this." He stood there for a moment longer, lips parted as if considering another attempt. Then quietly, he walked away, disappearing into a black car that didn't belong on this street. Emily stood alone again, surrounded by a crowd that had already lost interest and felt like the last note of a song no one stayed to hear. That night, her apartment was colder than usual. The radiator wheezed in protest, and the city outside was loud with ambition she couldn't afford. Emily sat on her bed, the shattered violin laid out in pieces like a body awaiting autopsy. She hadn't cried yet, not when it happened, not on the train, not even now. She didn't cry because she couldn't afford to. Tomorrow she would have to perform again, without a violin, without a plan, just with that same bitter resolve that had kept her afloat since everything else in her life had fallen apart. The next morning, she woke up to an envelope under her door. No name, no note. Inside was a gift certificate to one of the most prestigious music shops in the city, and a business card, Nathaniel Blake, CEO, a number scribbled in ink. She stared at it for a long time. Her first instinct was to tear it up, to burn it. But the idea of playing again, of even holding something that made music, it clawed at her resolve. At noon, she walked into the music shop with her hoodie pulled up and her doubts coiled tightly around her spine. She didn't want charity, but when the clerk greeted her with a soft smile and said, "Mr. Blake called ahead. Everything's been arranged," she felt her defenses crack. The violin they offered wasn't hers. It never would be. But when she touched the strings and pulled the bow across, the sound that rose was warm and haunting. For the first time in weeks, Emily exhaled. Outside, leaning casually against a lamppost, was Nathaniel. No sunglasses this time, just a cautious, waiting look. "I didn't expect you to come," he said quietly. "I didn't come for you," she replied. "I came for the music." He nodded, as if that answer was exactly what he hoped she'd say. Nathaniel didn't follow her as she left the shop. He didn't call after her or try to make another grand gesture. He simply stayed leaning against that lamppost, watching her vanish into the tide of city movement, the violin case now slung over her shoulder like a battle scar. Emily didn't look back. She didn't need to. His face was already burned into her memory, restrained guilt, a touch of pride, and something else, something human. That night, the violin sat untouched on her kitchen table while she sat beside it, tuning it by ear. She didn't know why she was hesitating. Maybe it was fear that she'd sound different now, that the music wouldn't come back, or worse, that it would, and she'd be reminded of everything she lost. But when she finally pulled the bow across the strings, it came out smooth. Her hands remembered even if her heart wasn't ready. At exactly 7:04 p.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Just one message. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., St. James Park. I'll explain. No strings attached. Promise. She stared at it, deleted it, then retrieved it from the recently deleted folder. Damn curiosity. She wasn't sure why she showed up. Maybe it was the violin. Maybe it was the lingering look he'd given her, or maybe it was because no one had ever tried to fix something for her before. Not really. Either way, she found herself sitting on a worn bench near the old carousel. At exactly 2:59 p.m., heart pounding as if she were auditioning again. He arrived late, holding 2 coffees and a brown bag that looked suspiciously like pastries. "I wasn't sure what you liked," he said, offering the bag. "So I got everything with sugar and regrets." She raised an eyebrow. "You always bring snacks to your apologies?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Only when I mean them." There was a beat of silence between them, not awkward, just suspended, like a held breath in a symphony. "You don't strike me as the type who apologizes often," she said finally. "I'm not," he admitted. "But I also don't usually ruin people's lives in under 30 seconds. Thought I should try something new." Emily took a sip of the coffee. It was too hot and burned a little, but she didn't flinch. "Why do you care?" she asked. "I mean, you could have just ignored me, walked away, bought yourself a guilt-free conscience." He looked out at the park, where a few children chased pigeons, and a saxophonist played a slow tune under a sea tree. "Because you looked at me like I was nothing, and I believed you." That caught her off guard. "Excuse me? I've been called a genius, a monster, a tech messiah. But no one's ever looked at me like you did, like I was just another guy in the way." It shook me, still does. Emily didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. Nathaniel set the coffee down and leaned forward. "I meant what I said, about helping. I'm funding a community music program in Redford. It's for kids who can't afford instruments, lessons, or attention. It starts in 2 weeks. I need someone who gets it, not just music, but what it means to lose it." She blinked. "You want me to—" "What?" "Teach." "Co-lead," he said. "Design the program, mentor the kids, build something that lasts." She laughed bitterly. "You don't even know me. I know you kept playing when no one listened. That's enough for now." She stared at him, unsure if this was insanity or the first breath of something new. Redford was 3 hours away. Her rent was overdue, and her soul was tired of scraping by. "What's the catch?" "No catch," he said. "No strings attached, unless you count the violin kind." Emily rolled her eyes but cracked a small, unwilling smile. "You're corny." "I'm persistent." She stood, slinging the violin case over her shoulder. "I'll think about it." "I can live with that," he said, standing too. As she walked away, he called after her, "Oh, and Emily?" She stopped but didn't turn. "Thank you for not throwing the coffee in my face." She didn't respond, but the smile that flickered as she walked out of sight was all the answer he needed. The map was blurry, not the actual lines. The roads, intersections, and small dot-labeled Redford Community Arts Center were crisp enough, but the future it represented was murky at best. Emily stared at the screen on her cracked phone for the 5th time that morning, sitting on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by boxes she wasn't sure she'd need to unpack again. Redford was a town no one talked about unless they were trying to avoid it. It was the kind of place where factory closings hit like tornadoes, and everyone knew who your father used to be before he drank it all away. Emily had passed through once on a Greyhound when she was 16. She remembered boarded-up storefronts, train tracks cutting through a silence that felt too thick. She never thought she'd go back there willingly. But now, Nathaniel Blake, the accidental destroyer of her most prized possession, had extended something more than a new violin. He'd offered a clean slate, maybe even a purpose. She didn't trust it, not entirely. But something in his eyes that day in the park stuck with her. Not desperation, but hope. The kind you try to bury when you're used to disappointment. 3 days later, she was on a bus with everything she owned in a duffel bag and a violin case she still hadn't played in public. Redford approached slowly through the window, a fading skyline swallowed by trees and power lines. The Arts Centre sat on the edge of town, a refurbished post office with bright murals and ivy strangling the side walls. Kids played tag in the gravel lot, laughing like they'd never been told dreams don't pay rent. Inside, Nathaniel waited in worn jeans and a threadbare jacket, nothing like the version of him she'd seen downtown. He looked real. "You made it," he said, as if surprised. "I still might run," she warned. "Don't get comfortable." He smiled, but his eyes searched her face. "You don't look like someone who runs. You look like someone who fights until they drop." "Same difference. I've just been losing a lot lately." "Well," he said, leading her inside, "maybe it's time you won something." The center smelled of fresh paint and sawdust. Volunteers were still building the stage. A chalkboard listed names of kids already enrolled, most of them scribbled, with backwards letters and stars. "You're the new music lead," Nathaniel explained. "The last one bailed when he realized there's no AC and the salary's modest." "Define modest." "You won't starve," he said, "but you might have to befriend canned beans." Emily raised an eyebrow. "You're a billionaire, remember? I'm trying to do this right. No optics, no headlines, just impact. And if I pour money on everything, it'll crumble the moment I step back. I need this to stand on its own." She hated that it made sense. Even more, she hated that she respected it. "So you want me to stay?" "I want you to lead," he said, "and I'll back you quietly, unless someone threatens the program, in which case I'll be as loud as necessary." That afternoon, they cleaned out the storage room and built shelves from donated wood. She found old sheet music with notes scribbled in crayon. He told her stories about the kids, their tempers, their fears, their brilliance. Emily didn't realize she was smiling until she caught herself in the reflection of a dusty window. Later that evening, Nathaniel walked her to a small guest house beside the center. "It's not luxury," he warned, unlocking the door, "but it's yours for as long as you need it." Emily stepped in. The floor creaked, and the wallpaper peeled at the corners. But it was warm, safe. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel borrowed. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. He leaned against the doorframe. "Because when your world broke, you didn't beg. You didn't scream. You stood in the middle of chaos and said, 'Go.' That's who I want building something from scratch." Her throat tightened. "I don't trust you." "You don't have to. Just trust the music." She didn't respond, but later, when the moon cut across her ceiling and the sound of children laughing echoed faintly in the night, she took the violin out of its case and played just a few notes, soft and imperfect. And somewhere outside, Nathaniel stood still, listening in the dark, eyes closed, as if the melody could finally bring back the part of him he thought was gone. Nathaniel hadn't slept well in over a decade. Even before the headlines, before the wealth, before he knew what a quarterly earnings report was, His dreams had been haunted by the same sound. Not sirens or screams, but silence. The kind that followed a mistake too heavy to erase. That silence had a name, Chloe. He woke up in the staff office that doubled as his makeshift apartment, the sunlight creeping in through cheap blinds. The center would open in an hour. Volunteers would arrive, followed by the students, kids with wide eyes and scars hidden under sarcasm. Nathaniel brushed his teeth in a cracked mirror and tried not to look too long. He didn't always like the man staring back. At 9 a.m., Emily was already in the music room, organizing sheet music and humming something that sounded familiar but off-tempo, like she was rewriting it in real time. She didn't notice him leaning in the doorway until he spoke. "You hum when you're anxious." She looked up sharply. "You analyze people when you should be making coffee." He lifted a thermos. "Already did. Want some?" She nodded and accepted the mug. "Rough night?" "Always." He sipped. "You." "I dreamt I was late for a concert, only I didn't have a violin or shoes. Everyone just watched me crumble." Sounds familiar. Their silence stretched comfortably until a voice interrupted, an older woman entering the room with crisp clothes and a clipboard. "Nathaniel Blake," she said coolly. "I'm Dr. Lena Ward from the Foundation Oversight Board." His smile vanished. "You weren't scheduled until next week." "There was a change," she said. Her eyes flicked toward Emily. "Is this one of your staff?" "I'm helping with music," Emily said, stepping forward. She didn't like the woman's tone. "I need to speak to Mr. Blake. Alone," Dr. Ward insisted. Nathaniel glanced at Emily. "It's okay." She hesitated, then left the room. But not before catching a shadow in Nathaniel's eyes she hadn't seen before. Not anger, not fear. Guilt. Outside, Emily tried to eavesdrop, but the walls were too thick, so she sat in the hallway, listening instead to the distant laughter of kids arriving, the shuffle of sneakers and excitement in every footstep. It reminded her what was at stake. She didn't even work there officially, yet she already felt ownership over the lives walking through those doors. Inside, Doctor. Ward's voice remained steady. "The board wants transparency, Nathaniel, especially after the Brazil incident." His jaw tightened. "That was 5 years ago. And it's still on record. Half-completed clinics, untrained staff, 1 patient dead. That stays with you." "I wasn't the CEO then." "But you were there. You signed off on the funding. You fought to keep it quiet." Nathaniel sat back. "Because if I hadn't, we would have lost the whole initiative. I tried to fix it. You know I did." Dr. Ward leaned in. "Then don't make the same mistake here." Outside, Emily stood up as the door opened. The woman passed her without a word. Nathaniel remained seated, his face pale and unreadable. "What was that about?" Emily asked gently. "History," he said. "The kind that doesn't stay buried." "Talk to me." He hesitated. "Then there was a girl, Chloe, my sister. She died in a clinic we helped build. They weren't ready. Not enough staff, no oversight. I'd pushed the timeline to prove I could lead. She paid the price." Emily's voice dropped. "And the silence?" "It's what I heard when they told me she was gone. That silence never leaves." She didn't say anything. She just sat beside him, her fingers brushing, his briefly anchoring him. "That's why this place matters," he whispered. "It's my penance, my promise, my second chance. And you think one program will fix all that?" "No," he said, "but it might fix me." She looked at him, truly looked. Past the careful charm, the curated confidence, what she saw was a man terrified not of failure, but of redemption he didn't think he deserved. "We don't get to erase our ghosts," she said, "but we can change what they haunt." Nathaniel closed his eyes. For the first time, the silence didn't feel quite so loud. By the time Thursday arrived, the Redford Community Arts Centre felt like it had been standing for years, even though half the supply shelves were still empty and the light in the hallway flickered like it had stage fright. But it was the kids who gave it weight. Their noise, their chaos, the way they filled the building with messy energy and sudden quiet when a melody caught them by surprise. Emily stood in the music room, arms crossed, watching a boy named Tyrell wrestle with a cello twice his size. He kept shifting in his chair, frustrated. "It doesn't sound right," he muttered. "It sounds like it's dying." "Maybe it is," she replied, "but that's the thing about dying sounds. They usually mean something." He looked at her. "You saying it's me? I'm saying maybe you need to let it hurt a little. Play ugly, then clean it up." He furrowed his brow, then drew the bow again, slower this time. A note emerged, still raw but sincere. Emily smiled without meaning to. Nathaniel watched from the hallway. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but seeing her command the space, not with authority but with truth, anchored something in him. She wasn't trying to save anyone. She was just showing them how to find something worth holding on to. Later, while sorting through dusty instrument cases in the storage room, Emily heard footsteps and turned to find a new face. Mid-30s, polished suit, fake smile. "You must be Emily," he said. "And you are?" "Derek Walsh, consultant from Miller Enterprises, sent by Mr. Blake's board. I'm here to make sure everything's running efficiently. Didn't know we needed supervising." "Everything needs a little supervision," he said, surveying the room with a critical eye, "especially when hearts get involved." Emily narrowed her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Oh, nothing," he smiled. "Just heard you and Nathaniel are close." She crossed her arms. "We work together, that's it." "Of course," but the way he said it suggested otherwise. "I'll be shadowing the program for a few weeks, observing, reporting. You know how it goes." She didn't like the sound of that or him. Something about Derek was too smooth, too curated, like he belonged in a conference room, not a community center. That evening she told Nathaniel about the visit. He stiffened. They said they might send someone, but not this soon, and not Derek. "You know him?" "We've crossed paths. He's not someone I'd trust with a houseplant, let alone kids." "Then why is he here?" Nathaniel sighed. "Because the board thinks I'm too emotional, too involved. They want someone to watch me." Emily scoffed. "You mean watch us?" He looked at her, something unspoken passing between them. Days passed. Derek lingered. He took notes during classes, asked strange questions, complimented the kids too loudly. He never touched an instrument, but he always hovered close enough to hear everything. One afternoon, Emily caught him outside talking to a parent. The conversation was polite, but her instincts buzzed like a live wire. She approached, smiling. "Everything okay here?" Derek turned. "Just praising your curriculum. Innovative. Risky." The parent excused herself, clearly uncomfortable. Emily stepped closer. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm not a pawn." "Relax," Derek said smoothly. "You're not the one under review." She didn't believe him, not for a second. That night, Nathaniel and Emily sat on the roof of the A Center, watching stars peek through city haze. "He's trying to find something," she said. "I know." "Do you think he'll succeed?" Nathaniel turned to her, eyes soft. "Only if we give him something to find." She hesitated. Then, "Why does he hate you?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Because I used to be him, and I walked away." Emily looked up at the stars, wondering if they were still visible in Derek's world, or if his sky was full of glass ceilings and fluorescent light. It started small, like a whisper behind a door, a missing shipment of music stands, a discrepancy in the budget log, a donation check that hadn't cleared. Emily noticed first because she was the one cataloguing supplies late into the night, her fingers stained with ink and her patience thinned to a thread. At first she thought it was just disorganization, but the patterns felt too precise to be random. Nathaniel listened quietly as she laid the paperwork out across the staff room table. His expression darkened as she spoke. "It's not just sloppy," she said. "It's surgical. Someone's making it look like we're bleeding funds." He looked at the numbers, the emails, the purchase orders. "We need to lock this down before the board smells smoke." "They already did," she replied. "They sent Derek." Nathaniel rubbed his temples. "We can't confront him without proof, and if we accuse the wrong person, we lose credibility at the fast." Emily exhaled. "So what do? We track everything, every transaction, every missing item. We keep a record so airtight it can't be denied." The next week turned into a silent war. Emily doubled her bookkeeping. Nathaniel met with suppliers directly. They even installed a basic surveillance system in the supply room, a low-resolution camera hidden behind a dusty trophy shelf. Neither of them said it out loud, but both knew this wasn't just sabotage, it was personal. Then came the worst blow. A Friday morning, 3 volunteers arrived to find the back door of the center wide open. Inside, chaos. Cabinets emptied, papers shredded, boxes of new instruments gone. The locks hadn't been broken. Whoever had done it had a key. The police arrived, took statements, and left with bored efficiency. "Probably just kids," the officer shrugged. "Nothing worth investigating." Emily watched the cruiser drive away with disbelief. Nathaniel stood beside her, arms crossed, face carved from stone. "He's escalating," she said. "Or desperate," he murmured. "He's pushing us to break." And then came the leak. An anonymous email sent to several parents claiming mismanagement, fraud, and misconduct at the center. The email included edited images of financial documents, enough to seed doubt, if not prove anything outright. Emily read it twice. Who would believe this crap? Nathaniel didn't answer. His phone was already buzzing with calls. By Monday, 2 kids had been pulled from the program. A third parent showed up demanding answers. Derek, of course, arrived with faux concern and subtle jabs. "It's unfortunate," he told Nathaniel, "but perception is reality." "You're manufacturing the perception," Nathaniel said. "I'm reporting what I see, and what I see is a crumbling system." Emily had to leave the room. She didn't trust herself not to slap him. That night she stood alone in the practice room, bow in hand, violin poised, but no music came out. Her mind was too loud, too filled with worry and rage. She sank into a chair, defeated. The project had become a battlefield, and no matter how noble their intentions didn't stop bullets. Then quietly she heard footsteps. Nathaniel entered, sat down across from her, and didn't speak. He just looked at her, really looked, like she was a mirror, and he was trying to see himself clearly. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I've built things before, but this time it matters." "I know," he said softly. "And that's why we fight. I'm tired of fighting. I want to make music. I want to believe in something that doesn't fall apart." Nathaniel leaned forward. "Then believe in me." That was the moment, the fulcrum. She looked at him not as a billionaire or a broken man, but as someone willing to bleed beside her for something that might not survive. That was faith, she realized. Not certainty, but standing in the fire and reaching anyway. She nodded once. And for the first time since the chaos began, neither of them felt alone in the war. The center was too quiet, not peaceful, tense, like the moments before a string snaps under pressure. Nathaniel sat in his office staring at the wall, not at the photos of progress pinned there or the list of milestones he'd proudly drafted 2 months ago. He was staring through them, like they were ghosts of a dream he wasn't sure he deserved to finish. Emily entered without knocking. She always did. "2 more kids withdrawn," she said. "Parents say they're uncomfortable with the unresolved allegations." Nathaniel didn't look up. "How many left?" 24 out of 38. He sighed. "I should have seen this coming." "No," she said, sharper than intended. "You should have stopped it." He finally met her eyes. "Do you think I wanted this? That I let Derek in the door?" "You let him get close enough to gut this place," she snapped. "You knew what he was capable of. And you think I didn't try to stop it?" His voice cracked. "You think I haven't been fighting every damn day since this place opened?" Her silence was louder than any reply. The tension between them hung like smoke. She wasn't angry at him. Not fully. But she didn't know how to carry everything they were losing without placing the weight somewhere. And he was tired of pretending to be untouchable. "I think you want to save everything," she said at last, quieter now. "But you don't know how to protect the things that matter most." He swallowed. "Then maybe I don't deserve to run this place. Maybe you don't." The words stung more than she meant them to. She turned to leave, but he spoke again, soft, defeated. "I'm stepping away." She froze. "I've already drafted the notice to the board," he continued. "I'll transfer control to a neutral administrator until the audit clears. I'll stay out of the press, give the center a chance to breathe." "You're giving up." "I'm stepping back," he said, but even he didn't believe it. Emily faced him, arms crossed. "You built this. You made me believe it mattered. And now you're walking away." "I'm trying to save it." "By abandoning it?" "No," he said, "by not letting my name poison it any further." There was a pause. Then she spoke, steady but breaking. "You once asked me to trust you, and I did. Against every instinct, against logic, because you made me believe you'd fight." "I'm still fighting," he whispered. "No, Nathaniel, you're running." And with that, she walked out. Of the office, of the center, of the quiet partnership they'd been building like a house of cards in a hurricane. He didn't call after her. Maybe he should have. Maybe he thought if he let her go, she'd come back when things were better. But some choices don't rewind. Emily didn't return the next day, or the one after. Nathaniel's absence was announced in a vague memo. Derek, of course, remained, smiling in corners, collecting data, watching the walls hollow out, without touching a single brick. By the end of the week, the music room was mostly silent. The cello sat unused. The chalkboard had fewer stars, and no one hummed under their breath anymore, except for one small voice. Terrell, dragging his bow across the strings in the empty rehearsal room, stubbornly off-key, defiantly still trying. Redford felt smaller without the center. Or maybe Emily was just seeing it with different eyes, no longer through the hopeful filter she wore when she believed change could survive in places like this. She had returned to her old apartment in the city, but it didn't feel like home. Nothing did. Her days were quiet now, her nights too loud, sleep came in flashes. And when it did, it always ended with the same sound, that cello trying to make music out of broken notes. She hadn't spoken to Nathaniel since she walked out, not because she was angry, not anymore, but because she didn't know what she'd say. What do you tell someone who made you believe in something only to retreat when it mattered most? One evening, sorting through old lesson plans she hadn't had the heart to throw away, Emily found a folder she didn't recognize. It was labeled Audit Prep, D.W. Derek Walsh. She frowned. It must have gotten mixed into her files during the chaos. Curiosity, or maybe instinct, pulled her in. Inside were spreadsheets, donor lists, and internal emails, all printed, some annotated. But one email chain caught her eye. It was dated a week before the center was robbed. It referenced adjusted inventory reports and strategic underperformance sent to a private consulting firm. Attached was a payment, confirmation from the same parent company that funded Derek's consulting gig. Emily stared at the numbers. Slowly, the shape of betrayal formed. Derek hadn't just been watching, he'd been orchestrating. He was bleeding the project dry to justify a takeover. The sabotage hadn't been a reaction, it was the plan all along. Her pulse quickened. She scanned the rest of the documents, noting names, amounts, and timestamps. He'd covered his tracks well, just not well enough to stop a musician from reading between the lines. She called Nathaniel. No answer. She called again. Voicemail. She debated for hours, pacing her apartment. Then around midnight, she packed the folder, threw on a jacket, and took the last train back to Redford. She arrived just after sunrise, exhausted but determined. The center looked the same from the outside. Calm, deceiving. Inside, the front desk was empty. She made her way to the old office, now Derek's, and found him sipping espresso like he owned the air. "Emily," he said, all polite venom. "Didn't expect to see you again." She dropped the folder on the desk. "That's because you didn't expect to get caught." He opened it, slowly. His smile never fully faded, but something in his eyes flickered. "Where did you get this?" "You left it in the supply closet. Guess even liars have off days." Derek leaned back, mask still on. "You think this proves something?" "It proves everything. That the theft wasn't a coincidence, that the budget errors weren't mistakes, that you're trying to tank this center for a contract with that private firm." He stood. "That's a serious accusation." "Then sue me," she said. "But by the time you do, I'll have sent copies to the board, the foundation, and every parent who trusted this place." The silence that followed was brutal. "You really are a problem," he said finally. "No," she replied. "I'm the solution you didn't see coming." She turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Nathaniel didn't run because he was weak. He left to protect this place from people like you, but I'm not leaving." Back outside, the sun was rising, bold and defiant, like a new beginning. Emily pulled out her phone and started making calls. Parents, journalists, former volunteers, one by one she spoke the truth, not as an accusation, but as a confession of faith. That good things don't survive because they're easy. They survive because people refuse to let them die. She didn't know where Nathaniel was, but she knew this. The music wasn't over. Not yet. The Redford train station didn't pretend to be anything more than it was. A few tired benches, a vending machine with flickering lights, and a cracked intercom that stuttered out arrival times like a nervous actor. Emily stood at the far end of the platform, violin case beside her, watching the horizon swallow the morning mist. She hadn't planned to play today, but something in her chest refused to sit still. She opened the case, took out the violin, and tuned the strings with muscle memory. The notes echoed softly across the concrete, crisp and clear against the sleepy hum of the town waking up. She played something slow, haunting. Not a song, exactly. More like a question. A sound that asked, "Are you still listening?" She was midway through when the train hissed in, screeching wheels and shifting air. Commuters stepped off, heads down, shoulders hunched against the cold. And then she saw him, Nathaniel. He looked different, not the billionaire version, not even the man who once tried to hide behind charity. This version had stubble, wrinkled clothes, and eyes that had clearly gone a few nights without rest. But he walked like someone who knew exactly where he was going. She stopped playing, their eyes locked. For a moment, the station, the town, everything faded. He approached slowly. "You came back." "I never left," she said, "just regrouped." "I saw the press release," he murmured, "about the audit, about Derek." "You missed quite a show," she replied, not cold, just honest. He exhaled. "I should have been here." "You weren't," she said. "But I'm not mad, not anymore." Nathaniel looked down. "When I walked away, I thought I was protecting the center. But maybe I was just protecting myself. She nodded. Maybe, but it doesn't matter now. What matters is what you do next. He looked at her. Really looked. You saved it. You saved all of it. Not alone, she corrected. I just refused to let it die. I missed you, he said quietly. She didn't respond. Instead, she stepped aside and pointed to the center, just visible down the street. Then come see what we've built while you were gone. They walked together in silence, the distance between them smaller with each step. At the center, kids were already lining up. Tyrell saw them from the doorway and bolted over. You came back, he shouted at Nathaniel. Couldn't miss the encore, Nathaniel said, his voice catching. Inside, the building buzzed with life. Volunteers worked, parents mingled, music returned. Derek was gone, forced out by exposure. His departure so sudden, it left behind only a bitter aftertaste and a lesson. Some battles are won, not by shouting, but by standing. Later that day, Nathaniel stood on the makeshift stage and cleared his throat. There's no big speech today, just a promise. I'm not going anywhere, not again. I may not be perfect, far from it. But this place matters. You matter. And if you'll still have me, I want to be a part of it. The room clapped, not because he was rich, but because he was trying. Emily stood at the back, arms crossed, hiding a smile she didn't want him to see. Yet, that evening they sat on the roof again, legs swinging over the edge. Do you think it's possible to start over without erasing everything that happened? He asked. I think, she said, we don't start over, we build on what's left, cracks and all. He nodded. Then, I'm not afraid anymore. She looked at him, steady. Then don't run the next time it hurts. I won't. Not if you're still standing next to me. I'm here, she said simply. And for the first time, they weren't. Rescuing each other, they were walking forward, shoulder to shoulder, into something real. Fall arrived like a shy guest, brushing Redford with colder mornings and trees that flamed in gold and crimson. The center adjusted with it, swapping. Open windows for thick sweaters, bright banners for indoor lighting. But inside, something warmer was growing. A steadiness, a rhythm, not just in the music, but in the people holding it together. Emily arrived every day before sunrise, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The silence before the chaos had become her favorite part, a time when the center belonged to her and her alone. She tuned instruments, cleaned up forgotten sheet music, and sometimes just sat on the stage, staring at the empty chairs like they were waiting for stories. Nathaniel showed up an hour later, always with coffee. Hers just the way she liked. It down to the sugar she claimed she didn't take, but always stirred in anyway. They didn't talk about feelings, not directly. But their conversations stretched longer, their silences felt softer, and when she laughed at his terrible jokes, it didn't feel like she was doing him a favor. One morning, as they rearranged the supply closet, Nathaniel found an old, chipped tambourine. This, he declared, is my instrument of destiny. Emily raised an eyebrow. Please don't. I was in a band once, he said proudly. Oh, God. Middle school, we were called Static Ink. We had one gig and a deeply confused audience. She laughed so hard she had to sit down. I can't decide what's worse, the name or the visual. He tossed her a towel to wipe her eyes. The music was worse, trust me. There was something sacred about the way they joked now, as if the worst had already happened and laughter was proof they survived it. That weekend, the center hosted a small community recital. Kids performed duets, read poetry, even danced. Tyrell played his cello with fire and heart, and when he finished, the crowd stood in thunderous applause. Emily watched from the wings, eyes shimmering. Nathaniel stood beside her, hand brushing hers. You did that, he whispered. We did that, she corrected. Later, as they stacked chairs in the quiet aftermath, Nathaniel turned to her. There's something I've been thinking about. That usually means trouble. Not this time. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded sketch. Blueprints. A new wing, practice rooms, a recording booth, maybe even a small cafe, a place that says we're staying. Emily unfolded it slowly. Her heart thudded. This is huge. So's the work, but I want to build it with you. She looked up, unsure whether he meant the expansion or something more. Why me? He stepped closer. Because when things went dark, you didn't just hold the light. You were the light. Her breath hitched. I don't know if I can be that again. You already are. And in that moment, neither of them reached for the future with fear. They reached with hope. The next day, they began planning. Late nights filled with caffeine, spreadsheets, design sketches littering the office floor. Emily took meetings with architects. Nathaniel handled the grants. They argued, compromised, laughed, and when the work overwhelmed them, they played music until the world quieted down again. But amid the harmony, doubt lingered. Quiet, shapeless. One night, Emily asked, "What if this changes us?" He paused. "It already has." She looked down. "And if it changes us too much?" He reached for her hand, firm but gentle. "Then we rewrite the melody, together." And there, under the soft hum of ceiling lights, surrounded by the echoes of all they'd saved, Emily believed him. It was the third night in a row Nathaniel hadn't slept. The expansion plans were nearly finalized, funding was secured, and construction was set to begin within weeks. From the outside, everything looked aligned, but inside, he carried a storm. One he had hidden from Emily, from the board, and most of all, from himself. He sat in the office after everyone had gone, eyes fixed on an old folder at the back of a drawer, marked in his own handwriting, Chloe. It wasn't a name he said often, not aloud, but it lingered in his head like a melody he couldn't finish. The folder held records of the Brazil project, the clinic that collapsed, the audit findings, and Chloe's name, scrawled in an incident report attached to a photo of a half-built medical wing. He hadn't opened the folder in years. Tonight, though, something compelled him to. Maybe it was the guilt. Maybe it was the fact that he was building again, and he feared repeating history more than anything. Emily found him like that, elbows on the desk, eyes hollow. "Hey," she said gently, stepping in. "Didn't mean to interrupt." "You're not," he replied, quickly shutting the folder. She sat across from him, reading his silence. "Want to talk about it?" He hesitated, then nodded. "It was never just about the center or about the press. It's her, my sister." Emily waited. She was 19, smarter than me, more patient. She volunteered on our first humanitarian build. I pushed the project ahead of schedule to impress the board, ignored the warnings. When the roof collapsed, she was inside. Emily's heart clenched. "I'm so sorry." He continued, voice distant. "I promised I'd never build again unless I could guarantee safety. I kept telling myself this center was different, that we were careful. But every time we hit a bump, I hear her name. I hear her scream, except I didn't even hear it. I wasn't there. I was in a meeting when she died." Emily moved beside him. "You can't carry that alone." "I do." "You shouldn't." Silence settled like dust around them. Then Nathaniel turned to her, softer now. "Every time I look at you, I wonder what happens if I fail again, if I hurt you, if the walls fall and you're standing too close." She didn't flinch. "Then you let me decide if I want to stand close." He looked at her for a long time, as if memorizing something fragile. "I'm scared of how much you mean to me." "Good," she said. "I'm scared too." The next morning, construction officially began. The center buzzed with life. Volunteers hauling lumber, kids, painting Future Music Lab on cardboard signs. Emily walked the site with a clipboard, barking orders with more confidence than she felt. Nathaniel stayed back that day, claiming a meeting in the city. Emily didn't question it, not yet. but she felt the absence in her chest like a skipped note. That night, a storm rolled in. Rain tapped the windows like impatient fingers. Emily sat at the piano in the main hall, alone. She played slowly, letting the chords speak where words would fail. Tyrell wandered in, sitting cross-legged, nearby. "That song's sad," he said. "It's unfinished," she replied. "Like us?" she smiled. "Something like that." He stood up and handed her a drawing, a blueprint of the new wing, but in crayon. "For Mr. Nathaniel, in case he forgets what we're building." Emily held back tears. "Thank you." Later she sat alone in her room, Tyrell's drawing on her lap, and whispered into the quiet, "Please come back." She didn't know who she was speaking to, Nathaniel, Chloe, herself, maybe all of them. It began with a cough, not loud, not dramatic, but persistent. One of the younger students, a girl named Tasha, had missed a day earlier in the week. No one thought much of it. Kids got colds, but by Friday 5 more children were sick. And on Saturday morning, Emily walked into the center to find 2 volunteers, and Tyrell himself, curled up on the lobby couch, flushed and shivering. She didn't panic at first. She called the local clinic, left voicemails. No answer. She tried. Again. And again. By midday, she realized the storm was real, not just outside, but inside the center, tightening like a fist. Nathaniel wasn't there. He was supposed to be back from the city that morning. He hadn't returned her last 2 messages, and she hadn't pressed. But now she needed him, not for comfort, for backup. She called again, this time with urgency in her voice. Voicemail. So she acted. She turned the music room into a sick bay, rolled out sleeping mats, rationed Gatorade, made cold compresses from hand towels soaked in bottled water. She called parents, organized carpools, coordinated symptom logs. She did it all with the quiet focus of someone who knew there was no room to break down. Not yet. By dusk, the sky outside had turned an iron grey. Inside, she walked the hallway checking temperatures, humming softly as she moved, the only melody she could offer. And then the door opened. Nathaniel stepped in, soaked from rain, eyes wide. "I came as soon as I saw your message. What happened?" Emily didn't yell, didn't cry. She just pointed toward the makeshift infirmary and said, "Everything." He followed her, stepping into the room with stunned silence. Children sleeping under blankets. Tyrell coughing softly, clinging to a drawing of a cello. Emily explained it all. The timeline, the symptoms, the calls that went unanswered. He listened like someone trying to absorb a language he never learned. "They'll be okay," she said finally. "Most of them just need rest and fluids. But we're one step away from this being a full outbreak. And we don't have a single qualified nurse on staff." Nathaniel swallowed. "That's on me." "No," she said. "This is bigger than blame. But I need to know, are you still with me? Or are you already halfway out the door again?" He didn't answer right away. He moved to Tyrell's side, knelt and tucked the blanket tighter around him. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Not again." That night, they barely slept. They took shifts, rotated blankets, stayed, alert for any child whose fever worsened. Around 3 a.m., Emily sat beside Nathaniel on the hallway floor, their backs against the wall. "I thought I lost you," she said softly. "I thought I'd already failed," he replied. "You hadn't, not yet." Nathaniel turned to face her. "I didn't go to the city for a meeting. I went to Chloe's grave. First time in 6 years. Emily blinked. "Why now?" "Because I needed to ask her if I was allowed to move on. If building something new meant I was forgetting her." And she didn't answer, but the silence didn't scare me like it used to. They sat there for a moment, shoulder to shoulder, exhaustion knitting their breaths into the same rhythm. "You make me braver," he whispered. She smiled faintly. "You make me want to stay." By morning, the fevers broke. Parents arrived with soup, volunteers brought medicine, and the community closed its arms around the center like a protective shell. No one asked for permission. They just showed up. Later, standing outside with the sunlight slowly warming the wet pavement, Emily looked at Nathaniel and said, "You know what we did?" "What?" "We made music without instruments." And this time, when he reached for her hand, she didn't hesitate. The center buzzed like a hive coming back to life. The sickness had passed, leaving behind not devastation, but something strangely sacred. Parents stayed longer now, not just to drop off kids, but to talk, to help. Volunteers came in earlier, stayed later, and for the first time, the center felt less like a project and more like a pulse, something real, something alive. Nathaniel stood outside the new wing under construction, watching scaffolding rise against the skyline. It wasn't massive, but it was permanent, and permanence, to him, was revolutionary. Emily joined him, paint on her sleeve and a pencil tucked behind her ear. "Architect says we're ahead of schedule," she said. "I don't believe in schedules anymore," he replied with a smile. "I believe in momentum." She nodded, then took a breath. "There's something I want to do." He turned to her, curious. "What is it?" "A composition. For the kids. For the center. Maybe even for Chloe." Nathaniel stilled. "You'd write it? With them? Let them help shape it? Notes from each class? A collaborative piece?" He blinked slowly, then smiled. "That would be beautiful." Emily was already scribbling ideas into a notebook. "We'll call it the unfinished song, not because it's incomplete, but because it's always evolving, like us." Nathaniel felt something crack open inside, not pain, not fear, just a quiet warmth he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "I want you to lead it," he said. "I was already going to," she teased. Over the next few weeks, music poured out of the center in strange, chaotic, and perfect waves. Kids brought melodies. Parents added lyrics. Volunteers offered harmonies. Emily shaped it all, not like a conductor, but like a gardener, guiding, pruning, letting things bloom. And Nathaniel watched it unfold with wonder. Every note felt like a conversation between the past and the present. Every chord carried fingerprints. Even the silences had weight. One evening, Emily found him in the music room, alone at the piano, fingers hovering above the keys. "Play something," she said. "I only know half songs," he replied, "so play one and let me finish it." He started with a simple progression, soft, hesitant. She joined him, adding layers, minor chords, a subtle crescendo. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. When they stopped, the room was thick with emotion neither of them could name. "I've never felt this safe," she whispered. "Neither have I." They sat in that moment, afraid to move, afraid to break it. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "The board sent this, an offer." She raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "To take the program statewide. New centers, new schools, but they want a figurehead, a public face. And that's you. It's us, if you'll do it with me." She stared at the envelope. "That's a big stage." "Yeah," he said, "but I don't want to stand on it without you." She took the envelope, not to open it, but to hold it. "Let's finish the song first. Then we can talk about taking it on the road." Outside, the wind shifted, scattering leaves like pages in a story not yet closed. And inside, in a center, once built on guilt and hope, something steadier began to rise. Emily looked at Nathaniel. "Promise me we'll never stop rewriting." He nodded. "Only if you promise we'll never stop playing." Opening day of the new wing was everything Emily feared and everything she needed. The crowd gathered before noon. Students, parents, press, curious locals who once doubted the center's survival now showed up in their Sunday best, Cameras flashed, microphones waited, but inside the center it still smelled of wood polish and paint, still buzzed with that homespun chaos only real life could generate. Emily paced the hallway, half excited, half nauseous. The music students were lined up in their makeshift uniforms, clutching instruments and sheet music with the kind of reverence normally reserved for holy relics. Tyrell tugged at his too long sleeves. "You think they'll like it?" he asked. "They'll feel it," she said. "That's more important." Nathaniel stood outside by the entrance, shaking hands and smiling just enough to hide how badly his palms were sweating. The board members had flown in, along with 2 national non-profit leaders and a representative from a youth arts grant foundation. Big people, big stakes, but his focus kept drifting inside, to her. When she stepped onto the stage, the crowd quieted. Emily adjusted the mic, took a breath, and spoke. "This center was never meant to impress," she began. "It was meant to heal, and we're still healing. This song you're about to hear was written by 57 voices. Some can't read music, some don't speak the same language, but they all had something to say." She stepped back. The kids began to play. The melody was gentle at first, then restless, then warm, shifting styles like scenes in a life. Halfway through, Tyrell took a solo, the cello crying and roaring in turns, a voice no one had seen coming from such a small frame. Nathaniel watched with tears in his eyes. Not dramatic ones, just the kind that sting when you realize you're witnessing something you never believed you deserved. When the song ended, the silence lasted just long enough to feel sacred. Then the applause came, loud and unstoppable. Backstage, Emily wiped her face and tried to pretend she wasn't crying. Nathaniel found her there, holding her breath. "They loved it," he said. "They loved them," she corrected. He held something in his hand, a small black box. Her heart jumped. "Before you assume," he said quickly, "this isn't that. Not yet. It's a proposal of another kind." He opened the box. Inside was a key, gold engraved with musical notes. "I bought the old building across the street," he said. "I want it to be the Emily Carter Institute, a place for composition, healing, and second chances, run by you, funded by us." Her hands trembled. "You're naming a building after me?" "I'm naming a future after you." She stared at him, breathless. "Why?" "Because you taught me how to build without burying the past." Emily stepped closer, touched his cheek. "You still scare me." "Good," he said. "That means we're alive." The next day, headlines buzzed with praise. A broken town made whole by music. The tech billionaire who chose grace over glory. Meet the violinist who changed a city. But inside the center, everything stayed the same. Kids spilled juice on piano keys. Strings broke mid-rehearsal. Emily yelled, laughed, tuned, and kept showing up. Nathaniel sat in the new lobby, watching her conduct a class, heart full. He didn't need more money, more applause. He had found his legacy, and it had her name on it. The concert hall was nothing like the old center. It had velvet seats, professional lighting, and a stage that swallowed sound and returned it brighter. But the heart of the music, that stayed the same. Emily stood behind the curtain, adjusting the strap on her violin, fingers trembling, not from nerves, but from the weight of what this night meant. The Emily Carter Institute was officially opening tonight. A full-circle event with performances from Redford students, new admissions from across the state, and one piece to close it all. The unfinished song, finally completed. Nathaniel stood backstage too, watching her with quiet awe. "You okay?" he asked. "I don't think I've ever been this okay," she replied. Terrified, sure, but okay. He handed her a note. "Don't open it until after you've played." She gave him a look but tucked it into her pocket. "If this is another property deed..." "It's not." The curtains opened. The crowd rose, and for the next 20 minutes, music danced through the air like memory and fire. And rebirth. Tyrell played first, then 3 girls from Redford with flutes in trembling hands. Then the full group, the heartbeat of a dream come alive. Finally, it was her turn. Emily stepped forward alone. She lifted the violin and began to play. Not for the crowd, not even for herself. For Chloe, for the center, for every kid who thought broken meant finished. The final refrain was soft, not triumphant but honest, a single note that held a lifetime of ache and hope in its breath. When the music ended, silence flooded the room. Then applause, thunderous, rising like waves. Backstage, she dropped her shoulders, heart pounding. Nathaniel found her again, wordless, stunned. He didn't say, "Congrats," didn't say, "We did it." He just opened his arms, and she stepped into them. Only then did she remember the note. She unfolded it, eyes scanning quickly. It read, "You once told me unfinished meant always becoming. I've rewritten 1,000 endings for this story, but only one has your name in every line. If you'll have me, let's never finish it. Let's compose it, every day for the rest of our lives." Her hand trembled. She turned to find Nathaniel holding out a small box, this time with a ring, simple, elegant, real. "I didn't ask before," he said, "because I didn't want the spotlight. I just want the silence that comes after, the part where we stay." Emily didn't speak. She didn't need to. She nodded, then kissed him with the kind of yes no words could contain. Outside, the crowd trickled out into the cold night, unaware they'd just witnessed the end of a story that wasn't really an end. Because some songs don't fade, they echo. And in a quiet institute, in a once-forgotten town, music kept playing. Off-key at times, too loud at others, but always alive. The final refrain, it hadn't come yet, and maybe it never would.